Okay, good evening and welcome to Hackney Council's chamber and its planning committee meeting this evening. My name's Councillor Vincent Stopps and I should be chairing the meeting. The council will be recording this and live streaming it, so please be aware of that. We're now back in meeting in person. Councillors voting this evening are all here tonight and not taking part remotely as we have for the past year. We will be undertaking the meeting in as close a fashion as we can to our normal format. The virtual meeting technology has a chat function. Please only use the function to raise technology-related issues. None of us as members, nor I suspect officers, will be reading. When your camera's turned on during the meeting, please ensure that you are visible. Participants who have registered their interest to speak in the meeting should only speak when invited by me. If anybody deliberately disrupts the meeting, at least we can, with the technology, eventually have you removed. So please don't. If there is an internet outage, we will adjourn and try and get the technology sorted out and restart the meeting. Firstly, can I introduce members? So Councillor Sarah Young, Councillor Katie Hanson, Councillor AJ Chauhan, Councillor Brian Dow and Councillor Stephen Race here this evening with us. We've got our Head of Planning, our Committee Services Officer and the Legal Officer just out of camera to advise us. On remotely, there are other planning and transport officers who are here to help us to present the reports. There are objectors and applicants here, some in person. We've got to the first item, we've got both of them here in person. And are there any joining us remotely later? Or I haven't been advised of anyone. Okay, we think they're all here in person, members. Before moving on to the agenda, I'll take 2 minutes to explain how the meeting will proceed. We'll hear each application summarised by the officer, a 5-minute statement from objectors, followed by a 5-minute statement from the applicant. Where we have a councillor, and we have for this first item, there's an additional 5 minutes for them, which gives the applicant 10 minutes to respond. Of course, they don't need to use that time. It's my role as chair to make sure members have all the information they need to make the decision, objectors and applicants have their say, and that the meeting runs properly. I'll not be taking any contributions from anybody. I don't think there are any public here this evening. They're just watching us. And because it's a meeting in public, not a public meeting. As I've said, you have to keep to your time limit. And if there's more than one speaker, I think that maybe later on, you need to decide how you split that time between yourselves. Members are not representing either their wards nor their political parties. We make our decisions on the basis of any site visits we've made, what we've read in the reports, and of course, what we hear this evening. We must only take account of policies adopted by this council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Can I emphasise that members should not discuss nor take account of non-material planning matters? Members making decisions should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any of the applications prior to the meeting. Similarly, if they have any interest in the application site, all the people involved should declare that and they may remove themselves from the decision. When we finish our deliberations, we'll vote on the recommendation. When the decision is made, that's normally the end of the matter for this committee. The applicant may appeal our decision and objectors may seek legal redress and advise you to seek professional advice in either case. Finally, we will be taking a break because there are some officers still remote. And I suggest we probably do it after probably the second item. That'll probably be around 8 o'clock. We'll take 5 or 10 minutes, but I'll try and time it in with the whatever time the items take. Now, can we move to the agenda? Sorry? I know, but I introduced Councillor Hanson. Yes, yes, she was sitting in the seat when we started the meeting.
You definitely introduced me, Chair. I do have an interest to declare when you speak.
Okay, okay, so apologies for absence first. Please.
We have Councillor Joseph, Councillor Levy and Councillor Garassa may be late this evening.
Councillor Gressa may be late.
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. Councillor Hanson.
I beg your pardon. Oh, sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm going to withdraw from item 4. It's in my ward and I've met the officers who are working on the scheme a number of times.
Wow, you haven't. 4 is deferred. Apparently the housing, I should go on to say that in a second. Housing regeneration have asked that it be deferred for more community consultation.
I guess I'm not withdrawing from
As a, oh, right. Okay, and I haven't got any other any notice of anything else happening. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep, that's right. So we'll move on, not to item 4, but to item 5. We've got Sturt's Yard, that's on Eagle Wharf. We've got some residents here. Is that right from Sturt's? Okay. So we have actually got some members of the public. Lovely to see you. I think are you the first? No, we had one last time, didn't we? Okay. So Nick, over to you, please, if you'd present us with your recommendations, your thoughts on Eagle Wharf, please.
Can this be seen?
Not yet.
Yeah.
You need to change the camera.
Oh,
Sorry, yeah.
hang on. You might be okay, Nick. It might be our end.
Yeah, sorry, it is.
Just
There we are.
here we are. We can see you.
Can you see the screen?
Not see the screen yet. No.
I'll wait for you.
Is there a screen sharing option, Jess, to share? So I can see it on my computer.
Here we are. Oh, that
Oh, hang
looked
on,
good.
hang on.
That looked good.
And it went away again.
There we go.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, so we can see the site plan.
Excellent. 2021-0680 is an application for 48 Eagle Wharf Road, known to the applicants as Sturt's Yard. This site here, bounded by the Regent's Canal to the north and Eagle Wharf Road to the south. The canal forms the boundary with the borough of Islington. Adjacent to the west is the Holborn Studios site, and adjacent to the east is a warehouse storing artefacts belonging to the Museum of London. 7 and 8 story blocks facing the canal can be seen here. The view looking south is the Grade 2 listed terraces of Arlington Square and the Arlington Square Conservation Area in the foreground. The site itself is within the Regent's Canal Conservation Area. The Holborn Studio site is locally listed, as are a number of other neighbouring buildings, including 51 to 71 Cropley Street here. Sturt's Lot, the Lockkeeper's Cottage and associated buildings are considered to be buildings of townscape merit within the conservation area appraisal, and 5 and 6 story blocks facing the canal can be seen here. The application proposes the complete redevelopment of the existing self-storage site to provide a mixed-use scheme of 2 main U-shaped buildings. They would reach 5 stories on this elevation fronting Eagle Wharf Road and 6 stories fronting the canal. The scheme rises to 7 stories centrally, facing a 2-story centrally placed warehouse-style building with a communal residential courtyard above. 2 basement stories would re-provide the self-storage unit. The first 2 above-ground stories would provide office accommodation, and 139 build-to-rent residential units would be constructed above that. There are 4 main buildings on the current site: a 2-story gable building dating from circa 1860, a 2-story steel and concrete building dating from 1937, a 2-story building near the road dating from 1965, and a 3-story modern storage building dating from 2002. That latter building makes up most of the canal frontage seen here and is considered to be a negative contribution to the conservation area. The site as shown on the red line boundary does not include either Sturt's Lock itself or this area of self-seeded trees and overgrowth here, and these are not in the ownership of the applicant. The residential moorings in front of the site would also remain. That biodiverse area of self-seeded trees and overgrowth looks like this from the opposite topo. This slide shows the site adjacent to Holborn Studios. This slide shows the view from the towpath of the canal looking east. The 5 and 6 story frontages of buildings on the Hackney side of the canal can be seen beyond Holborn Studios here. For context, these historic photographs show the warehousing that originally stood on the site, directly adjacent to the canal wall. The canal elevation of the scheme is considered to represent high quality architecture at an acceptable massing for this location. The upper stories are shown lighter here to reflect that they're recessed considerably from the 6-story elevation. Discussions of the 1860 building to be demolished and to be reused within this central street, here, alongside the proposed canal side use. Canal side cafe use. The Eagle Wharf Road elevation has a 5-story frontage, with the entrance to the central street here, alongside this 2-story warehouse-style building with communal garden above. The internal elevations show the variation in height from front to back. As can be seen, the massing at the top story is closer to the Eagle Wharf Road elevation than the canal. The ground floor plan of the proposal shows the general layout. At ground level, the floor space is mostly in office use, shown in blue, with the addition of the canal side cafe, shown in pink. The slide shows the relationship to the canal, along with the existing canal boat moorings. The central street brings the canal side into public use for the first time and breaks up the massing of the proposed building. It's considered to be a real benefit of the scheme. The 2 vehicle courtyards are also shown. To the left is the parking for the self-storage facility, and to the right is the disabled car parking. The site has good public transport links, and car parking permits would be restricted for new residents. Policy compliant levels of cycle parking are proposed, although it's noted that the majority of the cycle stands would be 2-tiered. Much of the residential cycle parking is contained in this storage area. The proposal involves 2 basement levels, of which this is the lowest. The basement areas are mostly taken up by the re-provided self-storage facilities shown here in orange, and the void running from north to south is a sewer pipe. The first basement level contains the upper floor of the self-storage facility and also 636 square metres of office floor space, here again coloured blue. It's been agreed with the applicant that this basement office floor space cannot be used to house the proposed affordable workspace. As such, though the use and value of this office floor space is constrained by the fact that it relies entirely upon a large roof light, it's considered acceptable on the grounds that it's additional to the overall offer. And it may suit the needs of specific industries that do not value natural lighting and outlook, such as studio space. The first floor of the proposal is almost entirely office floor space, with the second floor of the cafe again shown in pink. The office space is considered to offer a high standard of accommodation with the potential for flexible rearrangement. In this priority office location, the majority of the proposed space overall would be in an employment use, either the re-provided storage facility or the office floor space. We note that the amount of employment floor space is circa 50% of the overall total, in line with the borough's redundant core strategy, rather than the 60% of the new local plan. As is laid out in the committee report, this reflects the fact that this is a legacy application from 2018, one which was rendered unavailable by the cyber attack, but which had been undergoing revision for a considerable period of time up to that point. In the circumstances, the significant uplift in the quantum and quality of the proposed employment floor space over the existing situation is considered to allow approval of this aspect of the scheme. As per the officer report, the proposed affordable floor space would represent 10% of the total office floor space and would be located at ground and first floor. It would provide the full 40% discount to market rent required by policy LP 29 in this location. In this priority office area, the provision of affordable workspace is prioritised over affordable housing. But following lengthy negotiations, the scheme would also provide 14 residential units at Hackney living rent levels, representing 10% of the proposed unit. The second floor plan shows the typical arrangement of the residential accommodation. The floor plan is quite densely laid out with a higher number of 1-bedroom and studio units than is usually found, being 66% of the overall total. The studio units are shown here in pink and the 1-bedroom units are in yellow. The number of smaller units has also led to 50% of the units having a single aspect, with 12% being north-facing. Many of these north-facing single aspect units face over the canal and would have a good outlook, but it is recognised that the internal single aspect units, like these, have a more constricted view. The 2-bedroom units make up the majority of the rest of the accommodation and are shown here in orange. The 3-bedroom units are in light blue or turquoise. Policy H11 of the London Plan asks that boroughs take a positive approach to the build-to-rent sector to enable it to better contribute to the delivery of new homes. As is laid out in the committee report, it's accepted that proposed housing mix is in line with likely levels of demand under the build-to-rent model and should be found acceptable. The second floor of the development also contains 3 of the communal terraces of the proposal. Here, here, and here. These terraces are additional to the private amenity space of the balconies that are provided for all of the residential units. The third floor plan is similar, save that there are fewer 1-bedroom units, more 2-bedroom units, and the 3-bedroom units are here shown in dark red to reflect that they contain only double bedrooms. As is laid out in the committee report, the standard of accommodation is considered acceptable. The residential units meet overall space standards and are well laid out, provided with acceptable levels of outlook, daylight and sunlight. Fourth floor plan mimics the third. And the fifth floor plan shows the step back from Eagle Wharf Road, allowing a communal terrace here. And the sixth floor plan shows the much reduced massing at this level. As is laid out in the committee report, in design terms, the proposal is considered high quality and of an appropriate massing. The scale of the development has come down substantially since the pre-application proposal of 13 stories and the 11-storey scheme proposed when the application was first submitted. The height and massing is now considered to be appropriate for the surrounding streets and canal. We've received a number of objections in relation to the amenity impact of the proposal, but as is laid out in the committee report, while there are amenity impacts to daylight, sunlight and outlook, for example, these are considered to be within acceptable bounds. This helps to affirm the impression that the height and massing of the proposal is appropriate for this location. In relation to the impact on the significance of designated and non-designated heritage assets, the Council considers that the harm caused to their significance is less than substantial. This less than substantial harm is considered to be acceptably balanced against the public benefits of the scheme, which include the opening up of the site to the canal, the creation of a new public space, the removal of the large existing modern warehouse building fronting the canal, and the creation of new office and residential units. There would be a net gain of biodiversity on site, including green roofs and 30 bird or bat bricks and boxes, and the urban greening factor is policy compliant at 0.4. The £40,000 payment is contained within the legal agreement for the Canal and River Trust. Air source heat pumps and photovoltaic cells are to be provided, and a carbon offset payment is proposed. The development is considered acceptable in respect of biodiversity and carbon emissions. So to conclude, the proposed application is considered to be policy compliant. The mixed use is appropriate for the priority office area, and the proposal represents a high quality design that would enhance the highly visible site within the conservation area. As is detailed in the committee report, in these and other respects, the scheme is considered acceptable. It's recommended for approval, subject to conditions in the legal agreement.
Thank you very much. Penelope, if you could tell us your observations and issues you have with the scheme.
Press the white button.
Was the white one? I thought it was the green one.
No, you just talk to the Google box.
Good evening, my name is Penelope Abraham. I live on the Copley Street elevation of Sawmill Studios, and I'm speaking on behalf of residents in Sawmill Studios, Copley Street and Eagle Wharf Road, all of whom live a stone's throw from this development of Stokes Yard and are represented here tonight. I want to begin by addressing what I consider the elephant in the room, which is nowhere mentioned in the committee report. As you will see, the access storage facility received planning permission in December 2004. This means it has had a use life of less than 16 years. In an era of climate emergency, it is vital that we maximise use of existing buildings to avoid wastage of embedded carbon within the existing materials and the need for enormous amounts of additional carbon-intensive materials in rebuild. Although this matter is not addressed in the report, please keep this point in mind when you consider the application. I would like to make 4 points, as well as wholeheartedly agreeing with those to be raised shortly by Councillor Maxwell. Firstly, the height of the proposed buildings, overall at 7 stories, are still 2 stories in excess of buildings in the surrounding area, despite the recent changes made. Although the intention is to set back the buildings in various ways, the height will still loom over our houses, the neighbourhood, and the canal side, with its highly valued amenity. My second point The report contains a number of compromises on Hackney policy, prompting the question, why have a policy if it is to be watered down to suit a particular development? References have already been made to less than substantial harm, and there's much talk of the need for a fine balance. As residents, we would like to see no harm and an avoidance of fine balance in favour of clear policy decisions. An example of this is the woeful lack of aspiration in the health and well-being section 6.9. Only 2 sections show as positive. All the rest are neutral. Likewise, in the section on employment and skills obligation, we are promised at least 1 apprentice will be employed per £2 million worth of construction contract value. This is an exceptionally thin offer. We expect so much better than this from our council. My third point, turning to issues around the canal. We appreciate the effort to open up the Sturts Wharf canal area to public access, of course. However, the increased footfall on the towpath from the residents' 139 flats moving to and from Angel and Dalston, etc., is very worrying. The towpath is already hugely overcrowded and already largely unusable by older people such as myself and disabled or vulnerable people because of this overcrowding. We cannot see how a contribution of £40,000 to towpath works can do much to alleviate this fundamental problem. I conclude with 3 serious concerns for local residents, which should be addressed before further progression of this application. There are references to land contamination, which are extremely alarming and not spelled out clearly. As we live adjacent to the scheme, we need much more information on this before any decision is made. Secondly, flood risk is flagged as a substantial issue. As the UK expects excessive rain in the coming years of the climate emergency, this is a matter that should be much more thoroughly clarified before any decision is taken on the application. I fear it is another example of compromise to suit the developer. Finally, should the scheme go ahead, which we hope it will not, we ask that the construction management plan include full consultation with local residents and establishment of a construction liaison group. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvonne, please.
Thanks. As a Hoxton West councillor, I'm aware that there's a real need for affordable homes to rent in that area. Many residents tell us that their adult children are moving away from Hackney as they cannot afford to stay in the area. There's also a need for family homes. Given this need, it is disappointing to see this development only offers 11% at Hackney living rent. This plan excludes many people locally when we have a serious need for affordable housing to supplement what we are able to build ourselves. As a council, we have high standards when it comes to the quality of the housing we build. We do not build studios, we build properties with at least 1 bedroom. In this proposal, over 30% are studio flats. The report, looking at Local Plan 2033, Policy LP14, states that this development is skewed in favour of small units, that is not encouraged by the policy. In paragraph 6.24, in justifying having small units, the report talks about the needs of the area. I am not convinced that we do not need larger properties. This section, this paragraph, in justifying the percentage of small units, also talks about 1 bedroom, not making clear that 30% are studio and have no bedroom. Talking of demand for 1 and 2 bedroom, but the issue here is studios, and that's not addressed in that paragraph. I question that 30% studios is acceptable. The report states that the internal rooms are also in accordance or exceed the Mayor's Housing SPG specification for living room, kitchen areas and bedrooms. I'm not sure how that can be with 30% not even having a bedroom. The officers themselves point out issues with the quality of the accommodation in the report. For example, the report states proximity of windows and balconies to neighbouring units is likely to result in a poor level of amenity for future residents, contrary to policy D6 of the London Plan. 50% are single aspect, 16 inward facing, single aspect, 2-bedroom units, have very deep living areas and are partially overhung by balconies, further impact on the levels of lighting and outlook. The report notes that there are some notable poor rooms, the report's words, in terms of average daylight factor. And to quote, 2 of the studio units would have an ADF of 1.3 and 2 of them would have an ADF of 1.4. Given that there is no other room within a studio to find better levels of daylight, these results are not ideal, but it is noted that these 4 units are a small percentage of the 43 studio units proposed, unquote. These are somebody's potential homes. It doesn't matter that overall it's only 4 studios. We should not be supporting the development of homes with poor lighting and no bedrooms. Given the acknowledged poor quality being developed, of the homes being developed, I question why this has been proposed for approval tonight. In terms of child-friendly spaces, there's no mention of the child-friendly guidance and spaces guidance. What has been offered is a second-floor terrace as a play space. The child-friendly document states a preference for ground-level doorstep play. It is disappointing that 10% of office floor space has a 40% discount, especially with many small businesses struggling as we come out of the pandemic. And do we know that there is actually a demand for this with more home working for what has been offered? To sum up, this development does not meet the high standards we expect in Hackney, the standards we apply to new housing that we as a council build. The affordable workspace offer is limited. Many exceptions have been made for this development where it's not meeting our standards, and I'd add the needs of the area. I'm concerned that we would approve housing that we would not find acceptable in anything we developed. I also share the concerns highlighted by residents around density, height and impacts on the local area. I would also note that this development impacts on the neighbouring borough of Islington. With all the exceptions, I do not think this development meets the needs of the area, and the impacts and quality do not meet the standards, especially around the quality of the housing. And I think there is desperately a need for better rented housing in our ward, but I'm really sad to say this does not meet that need. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Poole, please.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My client has owned the access storage business for many years. They have an ambition to diversify and to repurpose their facilities across London to provide a combination of rental homes, offices and, of course, storage facilities. They see this combination of land uses as being both highly complementary and sustainable, where you can live above your office, and if you want more storage for either your home or your business, then there's storage space available in the basement. We started working on the concept of this with your officers around 5 years ago. The planning application was lodged in 2017 and we were caught up in the cyber attack and then had to withdraw and resubmit in February of this year. During that period, as a response to consultation, the scale of development, as you've seen from one of the slides earlier, has been significantly reduced from 10 stories down to a maximum of 5, 6 and 7. These new heights are readily relatable to the established scale along large parts of the canal and the vicinity of the site. The site will be opened up and new public spaces formed within the site and along the canal side, using high quality design and a creative reuse of historic fabric. We believe that this will be a major positive asset to the wider community. We also share the view of other commentators where it's concluded that the design, layout and appearance will enhance existing and emerging context. Whilst these complementary land uses are inherently sustainable, there will also be a site-wide heat network from a single energy centre and a carbon saving of 52%. In terms of affordable workspace, 10% of the office accommodation will be affordable at a policy compliant discount of 40%, and all of the affordable housing will be let at Hackney living rents, acknowledging, as raised by speakers, that priority in this instance is affordable workspace given the land use designation. With regard to daylighting and sunlighting, the proposal has been designed to integrate substantial gaps and setbacks to ensure BRE compliance. The report notes the daylight and sunlight impacts are acceptable. Finally, as you'll see from the report, our clients have continued to engage and have been open to consider design alternatives when issues have arisen. We have concluded that a high-quality design with an emphasis around creating new activated public spaces and a balance of complementary land uses, all within a scale that's prevalent in the vicinity. We would welcome your support and we will answer any questions that you may have for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so there's a lot to go through, I think, in this report. Thank you very much. I've got a few, but I'll open it up to members first. Would you like to kick off with any questions? Oh, I can. Okay. I wonder, I've got a few here. The first is the Islington Objection. Was that an early iteration of the 13 stories, or was that Nick, was that to the 7 stories?
The 13-story building was a pre-app, so it came down to 11 stories when it first came in, and Islington did object to that. But the latest version of it that was submitted for this application has always been, because it was lost in the cyber attack, it's always been this height, effectively. This was the height that was agreed previous.
So had they objected to a 7-story development on the canal?
Yes, they have.
They have, okay. The other thing is the Holborn Studios decision. The Holborn Studios decision was about us not reconsulting when there was a change in affordable housing. And clearly it's next door. So is there any applicability, is there any read across there with respect to consultation?
The consultation's been carried out following the finalisation of the viability discussions.
Okay.
We're satisfied that nobody will be disadvantaged by not having seen any of the viability discussions. Subsequent to that, we received a better offer on the affordable housing. Given that that was an improvement and didn't affect the viability discussion in any way, we didn't feel the need to reconsult at that point.
Okay. Councillor Maxwell talked about the 11%. What would she, and clearly she'd want higher numbers and larger bedroom sizes. What would be the impact in terms of the development and its developability if we had, say, 30% affordable housing on that site?
Well, aside from the fact that it's the property office area, so we will be looking at the affordable workspace, we don't have ability that we've seen any ability to ask for more affordable housing. When it first came in, this application, it had no affordable housing on it, and ourselves and the GLA looked at it, and we knocked it backwards and forwards as much as we could, looked at it in many different ways, but we couldn't get to an affordable housing offer. However, the applicants have listened to our concerns about the fact that there are 139 residential units proposed, and we would like to see affordable housing on it, and they have offered it's 10% by unit and 11% by habitable room, which is an offer that the viability doesn't necessarily suggest is there. It's still showing a deficit, but we couldn't be getting to 30%, we couldn't be getting to 40%.
Okay, and the GLA seem to agree with that. Is that the case?
The GLA have looked at this and have okayed our position, yes.
Okay. Sticking with that sort of area, there is a clawback here, isn't there? So if profitability is greater than one would have expected, my understanding is that there will be more affordable housing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That being said, we'd probably look at the affordable workspace first,
okay,
but at the same time.
Okay. And I've got one more on for you, and that is we've had Haggerston Gardens people here when we've done the Regent's Canal, and they've made a great play and they've done some fabulous work in terms of biodiversity, and they talked about floating gardens and all manner of things. Has there been any read across of that good work to this part of the canal? Is there going to be floating gardens, floating biodiversity or whatever?
When the Canal and Rivers Trust got in contact with us as part of this consultation process, they mentioned that type of thing along with a lot of other things. Now, the Home Studios development came with a payment to the Canal and Rivers Trust that wasn't specified what they would have to spend it on. But similarly, this one has a prorated payment to the Canal and River Trust for them to spend on biodiversity in this part of the canal or another part of the canal as they see fit, or possibly upgrading the towpath, or what they think is the most important thing for the canal at this stretch.
Okay, thank you. You've heard enough from me. I've got more. Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to pick up a couple of things mentioned by the objectors. Do we have a typical number of apprentices that we'd require or seek per million or whatever it is of construction? Is this unusually low, or does it represent?
Is it a formula, or do we pull it out of the air, or what? How do we arrive at one apprentice?
Well, it's one apprentice per 2 million, and yeah, this is the standard contract that we ask people to enter into in the legal agreement. The ways into work payment is additional. That you'll note in the addendum that is £230,000. That's based on the yield of the development, etc. There are a number of clauses of which that is one. Yes, and it's standard.
Okay.
Thank you. And the land contamination issues that were mentioned, are they material to this application considering tonight? Or is it?
Ordinarily, we'd put two conditions on, a pre and post development conditions, but the applicant's actually done a lot of work in advance, and our contaminated land officer has instead agreed the watching brief. There's two conditions there basically requiring that the work that's been done already carries on, and any contamination is essentially reported as soon as possible. You'll see those conditions at the end of the report.
I mean, it's possible the applicant might want to say something on that, Chair. If that's okay.
Okay, your developer owns this site, doesn't it?
That's right. I suppose what we could do is
Sorry, could you possibly speak into your mic? I can't hear you.
No, we're not speaking into mics, so
I shall speak up.
project yourself, Mr. Poole.
I'll try to enunciate. So we would have no issue in reverting back to your standard conditions. I mean, we've done the extra work, but it would be a way of revisiting what we've done hopefully to the satisfaction of your officers, and it gives everyone a second bite at the cherry just to make sure that everything's as good as it can be. As a suggestion.
I'd look to the officers.
Okay, thank you.
Recommendation on that, frankly, Chair. I don't know if I put enough about it.
Okay, and you're comfortable with the contamination condition, Nick, I assume?
Yes, our contaminated land officer suggested it, having reviewed all of the documentation. I feel it would be duplication of otherwise.
Thank you. Any more? Stephen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a few questions first on heritage and conservation, because it's quite a key kind of topic area throughout the report. I just want to ask the conservation officers, obviously the demolition of the 1860 building in particular is noted, and while the iron trusses will be kind of reincorporated, it doesn't look like it will be any form of conservation. So I just wanted to hear from the officers, please.
Tim here.
Conservation generally.
Tim is here.
Tim, could you talk us through the conservation issues, particularly the 1860 warehousing?
Yeah, I can. Would it make more sense for the council to do all the conservation questions and I can do it in one go? It's up to you.
I didn't think this is a big chunk, so
Okay.
yeah, please. You can do some background if you want. You do that so well.
I don't want to be here all night. In terms of demolition, there's a number of buildings on the site of different ages. The only one that we felt was potentially significant was this building from 1860, which I visited internally and externally some years ago. It's just essentially a Victorian warehouse which has its gable facing the canal. It's actually quite hard to see because of all those trees, and it doesn't look like much from the outside. It would have just been a warehouse. It's quite old. It goes back to 1860, and at one point it was associated with a gun manufacturer called Henry Gristle. It's been used for various other things since. The problem was it's been reclad externally in 1938 with wire-cut bricks, so the outside walls are all completely 1938, as are the windows, and the roof covering's been changed. So really the only thing in it that's sort of interesting into heritage terms was the surviving roof truss, which I wouldn't want to go too overboard on. I mean, it's a fairly standard 19th century iron roof truss system called Palenceau trusses. In this application, that is dismantled and used as a sort of ornamental cover above the cafe. So that part of the building is retained and reused. And we felt as officers that that was a reasonable response to that building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more, Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. And then otherwise, obviously the planning application abuts onto the canal conservation area and then the Arlington conservation area as well. It's quite noticeable. It is smaller, but it's noted in the report than other developments that have been.
1 minute. Somebody's got a printer on at home. Could you mute yourself, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Try again.
So my question just short is, given that the rest of the buildings along the canal have been occupied around 6 floors, this building being between 2 conservation areas is now at 7. Can I just understand the reasoning as to why this, why 7 stories is now being allowed, despite the conservation areas on either side of the planning application?
I think I can answer that one.
Is that Matthew?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. We can't see you there, Matthew. Here we are. We can see you now.
Yeah, see me now? So I guess the first thing to say is that the 7-story element is one part of the scheme. So this isn't a 7-story building. The 7-story bit is set within the plan. So this is a 6-story building on the canal. And that's sort of consistent with other developments that are coming up along the Regent's Canal within the conservation area, and there's buildings that are of a similar sort of scale to the west. So sort of our assessment in terms of height is that it is in keeping with the emerging context along the canal, and that is in keeping with the Regent's Canal conservation area. I don't know if Tim wants to add anything in terms of impacts to Arlington Square.
Tim?
Yeah, I mean, we had essentially an argument for several years about the height of this building, and this is where we ended up. It's slightly higher than the general rule of thumb, which tends to be 5 to 6 stories, but the taller bit is set back, so I don't think you'll see very much of it from the towpath. There obviously was an objection from Islington in relation to the impact on Arlington Square, which is a square garden with grade 2 listed houses all the way round. And we were concerned early on about, although it's a different borough, you can potentially see this building from within the square because the distances are quite small, actually. As an image which Nick has, if he wants to show it at some point, shows, the building is barely visible from the north end of Arlington Square, and from the south end of Arlington Square and the middle of Arlington Square, you can't really see it at all. And also we felt that Arlington Square wasn't entirely pristine. When you stand in Arlington Square, there are a number of other buildings which are visible above the houses at the moment, to the east and to the west and to the south. So although there is an impact, and we considered that to be less than substantial harm, so did the applicant's heritage consultant, and so did Historic England. So there is an impact, but we felt that it wasn't substantial. It was less than substantial, and therefore outweighed by the public benefits.
Thank you. Nick, do you have that picture?
I was just showing it. It's a bit irritating that no one saw it while I was showing it.
No, we didn't.
That's a game.
Can I say that Gainsborough Studios is 8 stories, and we alighted on 8 stories before we had a design and conservation team at all. And it's some regret, actually, Gainsborough Studios being quite so tall. So we do need to have cognizance of these heights on that canal. I don't know why on earth they came in with 13 stories. That was pushing it a little bit, I think. But so can we see this? Where is the building then? I can't see it from here.
Can you see the picture? Okay, so let me show you the existing. So the existing line is here.
Yep.
And that's what it would look like.
Okay.
So
beyond the, okay. Yeah.
I mean, I'll just comment on that, Councillor. That's probably the worst case because we deliberately chose the worst possible viewpoint. And obviously that's a winter view. So in real life, the effect would be less severe.
For most people, most of the time. Yeah, okay. Stephen, any more?
Yeah, please, Chair. So just moving on from into sort of massing and design generally, this has 33 studios. It has an under provision of outdoor space per report as well. So, I mean, do officers think that this is good quality design, good quality massing for Hackney in terms of development?
Under provision of?
Outdoor space.
Outdoor space.
And a lot of that outdoor space provided is communal terraces, which residents generally don't consider to be.
Yeah. So that's the intensity of the design, I think, Nick, is impinging on some of these issues. You know, the close proximity of balconies and the lack of a bedroom. I'm not quite sure they lack bedrooms, but it's some.
Studio flats.
They're just a single room, are they? Okay. So the designs of the accommodation, I think, Nick, and the massing.
We, to set the massing aside just for a moment, I suppose we don't get a lot of build to rent proposals. So this isn't something that we see coming through all the time. And our housing mix policies really relate to private sale developments. There is a recognition that the demand for larger build to rent units is not really there in the same way, partly because they'd be so expensive. Now, once you've got a build to rent development, you say that this is perhaps a good location for it because it's relatively central. It's going to have a different housing mix, an intensified level of units per floor, and that has knock-on effects. Now, given that this is actually quite a good location for single aspect units because it overlooks a canal, for example, there is you could argue that these rental units would be a lot better quality than much of the units you see in Hackney for private rental sale. There is good floor space standards, head height, all the things you look at, they've all got private balconies. What we look at in terms of policies is aims and targets, and we make the design of the development as good as we can within the particular parameters of the site. We've done a lot of work on this one. We think it's as good as it can get in terms of the necessities that the site puts on the development. And we recognise the weaknesses in the report. We ask you to make your decision on the planning balance. But at the same time, to go back to the first point that you made, which was about the outdoor communal space. Yes, they've got private balconies. Yes, there is a slight under provision in communal space. You could also say, yes, but it's next to Shoreditch Park and it's next to the canal. These are all things that need to be weighed up. We leave it to you to do that, but we've made our recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask one final question?
Yes, of course.
This was about Crossrail. I read the conditions about Crossrail. I wasn't quite clear on them, so there's someone could explain what they were and what they meant.
So the question is of whether Crossrail, for example, have objected to the scheme.
Crossrail 2, we're talking about?
We are talking about Crossrail 2. Crossrail 2 would never be drawn into an objection on the scheme, despite the fact that they have designated it as an area of interest to them. With no objection from Crossrail 2, there's no reason to refuse it on that basis. There are other locations that they could choose, but they weren't concerned that using this location would be sufficiently a problem for them to object to it.
Sorry, so I suppose, apologies, Nick, my question, and sort of Chair, Nick through the Chair. So TfL have required Crossrail 2 related infrastructure, protection and safeguarding condition, and this is recommended. But my question is, what is that condition? What's it mean?
Well, it's a little while since I wrote it. Let me have a look at it. What it essentially means is that any development on this site won't give you, won't make it problematic for Crossrail to be built underneath it. But let me just see exactly what it says, so I don't.
Jim, can you answer this at all? What's the Crossrail issues? Is it foundations or piling or?
I've got it up if you want to see it, if you want to hear from it. So it's they essentially need to show that all ground floor structures, foundations, and basements. Obviously, there's 2 basements here. Allow the proposed location of the Crossrail 2 structures. That any ground movement arising from construction won't be problematic, and any noise and vibration operating from Crossrail 2 won't cause problems for residents and structures and workers, obviously. So that's what the condition's aiming to do, to give details to show that these won't be problems at the next stage.
And Mr. Paul, do you think you can build this with Crossrail underneath it, do you?
That was our starting point.
Okay.
Satisfy ourselves. Otherwise, there was no point in starting.
Okay, thank you.
Could you repeat that for the?
Hang on. I asked a question, Mr. Poole. That's how it works.
But the objectors didn't hear. I think that it's reasonable.
The objector didn't hear. Okay.
That was our starting point, because we had to prove to ourselves that we could do it from a practical perspective, because if we couldn't, there would be no point in starting the process.
Thank you. I've got something to say on this later. Stephen, any more? Say again?
That's it for now.
That's it. Any more from anybody else before I do my few extras? Councillor Shohan.
Just quickly, I mean, just picking on an objector's point, they said that the towpath is overcrowded. Is there any way of linking the 40,000 that the canal and Rivers Trust are getting to making the towpath more user-friendly?
That's the point.
Okay, will we be able to dictate what they spend the 40,000 on? And have we got any ideas as to what they should be spending it on, Nick?
My starting point was the idea that they would probably know best what to spend it on. There were a number of things that have been raised even at this meeting. We're not really experts on whether they will need to do biodiversity in this particular location or upgrade the towpath in this particular location. In terms of capacity, I don't know that there's a whole lot you could do with the towpath. In terms of quality, perhaps there might be more that they can do. But
could stop the bicycles using it. AJ, have you any?
Yeah, just the objectors made comments about the studio flats. I just want the architects to tell us why the studio flats they believe are high quality.
Good question. Thank you.
Okay, to answer, we have Ali Payne here from the architects who can answer specifically that question.
Councillor, thank you for your question. Sorry about that. Thank you for your question. We think that they're very high quality in terms of the fact that they all have access to large windows, floor to ceiling windows, as well as outdoor amenity space. Many of them are going to be either overlooking a canal and or overlooking one of the 5 communal amenity gardens. We have not put them in the low quality or the low value spaces. They're completely pepper potted around the site. They've actually been chosen within the plan based on what was the natural size and shape of these 2 C-shaped blocks. So we haven't in any way tried to diminish their quality. We think that it's a very usable type of home for the build to rent community, something that allows people to get into the market, without yet being able to purchase. So we think it's an evidence-based need for our particular market set, of which our client is trying to bring forward several sites in London of this nature, because that's something that they're becoming a market leader on.
What's the target group you're hoping that will take these accommodation?
Well, we're not property agents.
Okay.
It's the young professional market.
Okay. I think that's coming over, isn't it? It's for Singleton, so it is of a type. And as I said before, any accommodation is in some ways takes the pressure off the housing supply, and so it does fulfill a need in terms of housing. Sarah.
it only takes pressure off the housing supply if sufficient people want to and can afford to rent it, obviously. Could you tell us a bit more about the decision to create this number of studio flats rather than 1 or 2 bed flats, and a bit more about there was mention from the planning officer, Nick, of the decision not to make more 3-bed flats because they'd be unaffordable as rental flats. I'd just like to hear a bit more about that in light of the objections, which I'm quite taken by my colleague councillor. So you've chosen to make a lot of studios, some 1-bed, some 2-bed, very few 3-bed. I'd like to hear why and whether you considered more larger flats.
Jim, yes, I think it's for you.
Okay. That decision is made under advice from property agents who identify what the rental market is in the locality and the wider area. So their view is to what is the market for rental accommodation, and what size of accommodation are they looking for, and if to create an economic and viable development, what does it need to be rented out for, and it almost becomes formulaic. I suppose one thing that I've heard a lot, which is, I suppose, it's accrued knowledge, is that in the private rental sector there is not a large demand for accommodation above 2 beds, and so it just wasn't regarded as being appropriate to provide more than we have. We were asked to validate that position by your officers, bearing in mind your policy. We know obviously that your policies allow flexibility to reflect the type of housing that's being provided, but nonetheless we were asked those questions, and we just drew upon other examples where developments have been rental product, but successful rental products, and sort of, you know, where if people have, in inverted commas, over provided family accommodation, has that been problematic to rent, and has it ultimately be rented by sharers? So everyone's just grouped together and taken a larger flat, which wasn't the ambition of our clients.
And Nick, for the record, this is policy compliant in terms of the Mayor of London's support for such development, is it? In a office area, commercial area?
It's correct that the build-to-rent markets usually seem to be in high-density areas such as this. It's recommended that we take it seriously as a model, and that 1 or 2 bedroom units are likely to be the housing mix.
Thank you. Any follow-on?
Well, just when you say they're likely to be the housing mix, do you mean that's where the owner/developer will make the most money, or that's the greatest need?
Well,
I know there was a lot of objections during the development of, I can't remember if it's called the SHMA or the SHLA, but the evidence base, basically, for the London plan. There were quite significant objections to the evidence base, which said we need more 1 to 2 bedroom places, and the objections were, no, we don't. We need more larger family homes.
No, I mean, it's understood. I think the point is that we need both.
Sure.
There is a great need for 1 or 2 bedroom homes. In this location, it's considered to be a good place to put some of those 1 or 2 bedroom homes. This isn't the type of housing officer that we get commonly. We're not getting build to rent being offered all the time. So our housing mix policy has been written in relation to private market sale, and we expect that housing mix policy to be the driver of the development that we see coming forward. But if we are going to see build to rent units coming forward, we're going to expect to see them at 1 or 2 beds. That's what H11 of the London plan says, and it does seem likely that that's where demand will be.
Thank you. I've got a few more. Matthew, we've got multiple colours and quite a lot going on. We've got the architect here. I wonder if we're happy with some of the materiality and the elevation treatments, etc.
Yeah, we are happy with the architectural approach, and that is something that was supported by the design review panel as well. So it's a complementary palette of materials. So they've got the 2 types of brick, which we'll get samples for those and mock-ups, and then you've got the metal detailing, which kind of harks back to the industrial uses along the canal. And you've got these quite nice copper-clad crown elements as well, so we think that's quite a nice feature on the canal edge. So we think it works well together and it's high quality design. As I say, we're going to get some full size mock-ups as part of the conditions.
Okay. Nick, there was something about the construction management plan. Clearly, it's a big project. I don't know if we can insist that residents are involved in the development of that, or we have talked about that. I'll ask Jim the same question, really.
In terms of construction management plan, it usually comes in at the next stage for expert opinion on, for example, Kasim's looking at us now, presumably waiting to jump in. But in terms of transport, street scene, our noise people, our air pollution people, it's to make sure that everything is looked at professionally from that standpoint. If there have been other schemes where the community has provided useful involvement, perhaps somebody could raise their hand and tell me about it, but it's not something that I personally do, because it's not the level of expertise that you would generally expect a local resident to have.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Jim, how are you going to make your construction management plan work?
To be honest, we have no issue with engaging our neighbours about what we're intending to do, because it affects them. And so if you wanted us to form a group of interested parties, including residents or councillors, to discuss how something's actually going to take place in the same way as...
Thank you, that's a good offer.
Yes, okay.
Thank you, that's a good offer. I have two more actually. One is on the this business of the GLA fast tracking 35%. I'm making a general comment really, and I'd be interested in Natalie's response. You know, we've got a policy of about 50%. Now, clearly we don't come anywhere near that in this one, but I'm a bit concerned that we're sort of giving some ground to this 35% notion. I really want us to stick with going for this 50%, because we've always done viability and we've checked it, you know, for how many years I've been a member of this committee, for 16, 17 years. You know, viability is nothing new to us, and we've always wanted 50% ever since Ken came. So I wonder if we could consider some of the wording and the thinking behind the mentioning of this 35%. Please.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So our own local plan still requires 50% subject to viability. So that's the kind of Hackley position.
Okay.
And we'll continue with that, those negotiations.
Thank you.
Affordable workspace stand in affordable housing you otherwise would have required in this application?
Could you say that again?
Does the affordable workspace in any way stand in for affordable housing that we otherwise would have required?
So in designated employment areas, we would always seek the affordable workspace in the first instance, and then negotiate on the affordable housing afterwards.
So, because I think Nick said that if the viability turned out better than expected, the clawback would actually be for affordable workspace rather than affordable.
Potentially in the first instance.
Okay. My second point I'd like to make is about this business of the building only being 16 years old, and it's a very good one. And I'd like to combine that with my thoughts on the Crossrail scheme and the construction of this building material. It's 7 stories high. It could be built in timber. And that would be highly sustainable. I can raise this because we have got a SPD that encourages timber buildings. The building would be 1/3 of the weight of a concrete building, and you could easily benefit from thinking about that with your basements. I'm not really expecting a comment on that, but if you could go away, should we decide to approve this and consider cross-laminated or other timber techniques, that would be, I think, good and satisfy the climate emergency issues that have been raised this evening. Thank you. Okay, any more questions, please? Stephen.
Sorry, Chair, I forgot a classic question around cycle provision, which doesn't seem to be very good in terms of it's all 2-tier. I'm not sure whether you have any provision for cargo rights, lodging rights for families, but
Okay, so Kazim, stand by. We don't like two-tier cycle racks because nobody likes two-tier cycle racks because you hit your head on them.
And we also talk about security.
And also, is the CCTV overlooking your bike racks?
I don't know the answer to the second question, but I bet Ali does. But in terms of the first question, that's an observation that's been made by others, and there was a suggestion that a planning condition would be attached to re-examine that particular point, specifically in relation to two tiers. So we share your analysis, your officers share that, and it was suggested as a planning condition to make sure that we deal with it before the development is complete. So,
Let's do that then, Chair.
Okay, before we go over to Kazim, is it going to have CCTV?
It will. May I add one more point, Chair?
Yes.
An amendment was made to include an element of the single tier provision, and I think that just hasn't come up in the report. Maybe Nick could clarify.
Okay,
the amendment was suggested. I looked at it yesterday, having got back from leave, and the amendment was essentially requiring that we agree a lower level of cycle parking. And given that there wasn't time to agree that, it would be better to deal with it as part of the condition rather than rush it through as part of the addendum to this application and give the impression that it had been sorted when in fact it's still up for grabs, essentially.
Okay, I'm all in favour of that. But Kazim, can you tell us what your thoughts are on this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I kind of agree with...
That's not Kazim. Here he is.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I completely agree with Nick's position on this. So we've had some improvement on the offer of single-tier cycle parking. It's still not satisfactory to the officers that are looking at this. The condition, which is under recommendation 8.1.25, does it's a pre-commencement cycle parking condition, and it recommends the majority of cycle parking will be single tier. So we are leaving that to that condition, and we'll work with the applicant if it's approved to improve the offer.
Okay, thank you. Members, any more questions? So I think it's so the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions, and we've talked about them this evening, legal agreement and referral to the GLA. All those in favour, please show. 4 of us. Are there any against? 2. Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, can I say one on the construction management plan?
Yes.
Can we provide a bit more detail now as to what that is?
Okay, so we'll leave it to Kazim, the officer. I presume you're working on the construction management plan, and the condition needs to reflect what we've said this evening, and that is at some point, probably early as possible, there is a offer to the local community to work with the developer and ourselves on what the issues are on the community, on the construction management plan. Is that fair?
Yeah. Chair, can I just quickly come in? It's covered under the existing condition, but we'll clarify the position. It's covered under 8.1.29.d.
Okay. You heard the resident, did you, Kazim? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So are you happy that we sort of know where we're going with that?
Okay, and is the reason for that addition to involve?
The reason is concern about construction management and the residents' views and issues, and the developer was more than happy to accommodate that. Okay? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, it's 20 to 8. What's the next one? Jeffrey Street. Let's take a break then. Let's have, let's have a bit of a break, please.
The last one, full council, I've been having.
Just one speaker, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and, yes. Okay, so, Louise, please.
Hi. Do I get started?
Presenting yet. Doesn't say that you're presenting yet. There we are.
Okay, we can see your site plan, Louise.
Okay, great. Let me just pull it up again. This application is for a new roof extension at 83A Jeffrey Street, which will provide additional floor space for the building. The building is currently in use as studios and workshop, which is part of the new E use class. The site is located to the west of Jeffrey Street, near the junction with Pearson Street. It is largely surrounded by residential buildings to the north, south and west. To the east of the site is the London Overground Railway and arches. These next few slides just show some current site photos. So this is the building in question looking from Jeffrey Street. This is the building when viewed from slightly further up Jeffrey Street. You can see the existing windows down that north elevation. And this is the courtyard to the north of the site. Pearson Street residents are located to the right in that photo. The proposed development is for a roof extension to provide additional floor space for the building. The extension is in the form of a dual-pitched roof constructed from standing seam zinc. The proposed materials are considered to complement the brickwork of the existing building, whilst ensuring a clear distinction between the extension and the original building. A dual-pitched roof is a style seen on similar developments in the area, and the round east and west facing windows reference Victorian industrial gable windows. The development also proposes the refurbishment of the existing building, including upgrades to the existing windows on the northern elevation to provide timber sash windows. In response to objections, the applicants have agreed to a condition requiring the existing obscure glazed windows at first floor level to be obscure glazed following refurbishment. The existing rendered wall and chimney are retained on the southern elevation, which is considered to be an improvement on earlier iterations of the scheme where the chimney had been removed. And this is the proposed west elevation, which is the one at the back of the building. This window will also be obscure glazed below 1.7 metres above finished floor level. That will be required by condition. This slide shows the proposed ground floor and exterior alterations. Cycle parking will be provided in the courtyard with staff changing facilities inside the building. Refuse storage will also be provided in the courtyard. There are no alterations to the first floor, so this proposal just shows the second floor, which just shows a single floor plate. This is the proposed roof plan. As you can see, there are a number of roof lights. These have been preferred to windows as they have fewer amenity impacts. And these are just a CGI of the proposed building as viewed from south on Jeffrey Street. Overall, it is considered the roof extension as a high quality development, which will preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area. The refurbishment of the existing building will ensure that overall the building will be a high quality development. Cycle parking is provided, which contributes to a sustainable form of development. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions.
Thank you. Objectors, please. Yes, please.
So my name is David Robinson. So I live at 14 Pearson Street, so it's directly opposite north. I strongly oppose the application because it's going to significantly compromise our privacy, and it's going to reduce life for both sides of the development, significantly negatively affecting our quality of life. First of all, I just want to focus on the privacy. So the building application adds a large circular window, low Velux windows, and glazed sash windows, both positioned less than 10 metres from residents' homes. Really without any screening to provide privacy, residents and plans. application is granted, occupants in 83A are going to be into our living rooms, our bathrooms, kitchens. We're going to, it's really going to compromise our privacy. On both sides as well, it obviously does. This will be compounded by the increased building capacity, along with bike sheds, refuge area, bins positioned behind our home. The building research, the BRA guidelines state that the recommended private distance are typically from 80 meters to 35. The application positions all windows almost off that. Next, I want to talk about reduced light and surrounding properties. Daylight and sunlight study was undertaken by applicants and the report is extremely examined proposal. The North Skyline assessment shows that 4 rooms do not meet the BRE guidelines, which limits the loss to 20% of performance value. The NSL loss for the rooms is between 25.9 and 36.3%, almost double BRE permissible changes. The annual probable sunlight hours assessment has identified a significant transgression, the 14 Pearson, and that's my home, that's my living room. You guys are going to take away that light from my living room. The assessment shows 66.7 window loss, bringing the EPSH down to 4%, which is below the BRE's guidance of 5%. The BRE states that at this level, the room may appear less cheerful and less pleasant. My partner suffers with seasonal affective disorder. The loss of living room height, especially in winter, would be detrimental to her health and well-being. Light is such an important feature of these historical buildings. Reducing the light is going to spoil the way they feel and the experience of living within them. To conclude, I ask the committee, in fact I beg the committee, to reject the application as the plans negatively affect the quality of life and the application reaches privacy and sunlight guidelines set by the BRA.
I live on the other side of the building, so it'll be on the other side of the proposed floor. I completely agree with everything the last gentleman said. It applies to me exactly the same. I'm potentially even closer to that building. The other issue I just wanted to raise is that there are 16 windows. Those skylight windows tilt on an axis. I think if you open those windows, the noise issue would be huge. We already, between where these guys live and we live, there is noise issues. It's just a concrete car park, sound bounces around. So to add a floor with 16 windows that could open on a commercial building, it could be really, really awful. But as well as that, everything this previous gentleman just said, I completely agree with.
And again, to sure we're running out of time, I can only agree with these two people. The points are consistent with us. We live at number 10. The only varying factor that we would obviously like to be considered that personally affects us is the end circular window that directly overlooks into our garden, which is something we've not experienced before. And we've completely invade that privacy that we've enjoyed for many, many years in the garden. We've enjoyed. So, again, very support what these guys have said.
On my side, those windows would look directly into my bedroom and bathroom windows.
Okay, thank you. Right, now to Mr. Mike Sandon. James, I don't know if you can split it 2.5 each to take you 5 minutes only, please.
You won't take that long. Perhaps I should start off and give you some context. This property has been owned by my family for well over 70 years. My grandparents' parents lived in Standard Hill. I actually live in Hackney. My father started off as a taxi driver, and indeed his taxi garage was where Sovereign News is now. It was a taxi garage. So this is an area we've been involved in for a number of years. My family actually owned the other 4 properties on Pearson Street. At one stage, we owned all of Pearson Street. During that time, we've refurbished 4 properties in Pearson Street, all with planning permission and all carried out sympathetically. I've just completed the refurbishment of 343 Mare Street, another property which is in a listed area. And again, that's been done sympathetically. So I hope that demonstrates that as a developer, I have a long-term commitment to this area, and I know how to do sympathetic developments in areas of conservation. The property for many years has been used by a variety of local occupants, including architects, a radio systems company, and more recently, the Peter Bedford Housing Association, who used it actually as a workshop. Our proposed use as offices, which actually would be a lot less noisy than using it as a workshop. They had a plant and equipment in the yard. The building has now reached the end of its economic life, and based on advice from local agents, we believe we can create a unique, attractive space at what will be quite affordable rent for local office occupiers. The additional floor will add considerably to the demand for the space, as will the creation of the garden space. The garden space will form a much more attractive outlook for anybody on Pearson Street rather than a car parking space. You'll get a much better outlook from the back of the houses. Since the beginning of 2020, we have undertaken extensive discussions and revisions to the scheme, working closely with the council officers. And that includes 2 pre-apps and a previously withdrawn application. As the planning officer says, we have evolved the design to meet any objections that have been put forward. And we've always sought to work in conjunction and cooperation with the council. From the outset, the principle of a single-storey extension has been accepted. The current 2-storey building is at a lower height than the majority of the neighbouring buildings, and the additional storey with a pitched roof sits comfortably within the site context. I'm aware of the objections that have been raised, but your planning officer's report sets out a very detailed assessment and response to all of them, and implicitly confirms that the development is not considered to have an adverse impact on the amenity of the neighbouring residents. In terms of overlooking, in terms of price, we have undertaken dual glassing, so there will be no overlooking of any adjoining property. In terms of the supposed loss of life, they, as your own planning officer said, are well within the BRE guidelines for an urban setting. We have also undertaken an energy statement to maximise the building's sustainability, and will provide bird boxes to improve the habitat of urban species.
Thank you. It's just yourself, is it? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Louise, the issue of overlooking, etc., is clearly one that has raised objections. Do you have a footprint so we can see the relative dispositions of the other properties in this? Because I didn't see one in your pack at all.
Yeah, I've actually got 2 slides. I'll pull them up and see what the best option is. This one first.
Okay, that's an elevation looking at the circular window.
Yeah. Is this?
No,
we've got one for either side, or do you specifically want a plan?
Well, I'd like to start off with understanding the distance between the circular window and the properties opposite.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the ground floor plan.
Okay.
So it's, I don't have my pointer, but it's so the building's on the left here, and then this courtyard is kind of a slight L shape where the cycle parking's shown. Those are the rear gardens of the buildings on Pearson Street that you can see at the top and to the right hand side. There's an extension on that second one down, so that's what's shown there. So the window on that western elevation, that's being conditioned to be obscure glazed and fixed shut below 1.7 metres.
And that is on the rear of the building, is it, or at the front of the building?
It's on the rear, so the rear one's been conditioned to be obscure glazed. The front one hasn't on the eastern elevation.
Okay, let's start with the rear one then. So the rear one is facing towards other accommodation, other buildings, is it?
I've got this image in the pack.
What have you got?
I think it'd be more useful for.
Is that a site plan?
Yes.
Okay, can we go to the site plan then, please, Louise?
In the pack, it's.
Oh, that's a good one. What was that?
That's
a good one. That's a good one. Right. So the workshop I can see there, and P of workshop is the window that looks over the road, is it?
Yep. So that one will be clear glazed, and then
Okay.
there's one on the red
No,
line.
no. We'll do one elevation at a time. So that is looking at the railway.
Yep.
And there are no overlooking issues there, are there? Because it's over a cobbled road. Is that right?
Yep, that's true.
Let's go to the rear circular window then. What are the overlooking issues suggested there?
So we've had objections from properties on Pearson Street that people within the top floor will be able to look out of that window into their rear gardens.
Pearson Street is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Those
Yeah,
there.
the terrace to the north.
So people are suggesting that you'll have an acute angle towards those buildings, and that will have a problem for them.
Yes, that's what they've suggested.
But you put obscure glazing in there,
Yes, there's a condition requiring obscure glazing.
and you're suggesting that deals with any problems like overlooking.
Yes.
Okay, right.
And fixed shut.
And fixed shut. Yeah. Okay. So the towards the bottom of the sides of let's do the sides of the building now. The one at the rear of this picture, at the bottom of this picture, is how many meters from that other building?
It's about 7 meters. Oh, I've got the exact figure here. Let me just pull up the notes. So it's 5.2 meters.
Okay. And are there any windows on that building 97?
There are windows on that building 97, so that's part of Sovereign Mews.
And what is the overlooking issue there then?
There's no proposed windows on that southern elevation, just the roof lights.
Just the roof light.
Sorry, can I just say that?
No, you can't, sir. No, you can't. You've had your say. So the roof lights, is it suggested the roof lights are overlooking these buildings?
Is that to me?
Yes.
So I believe that the suggestion was mainly for the west one, but there were comments about overlooking from the roof lights. So that's why we had those sections drawn up. Do you want me to show those again?
I've seen that. Okay, yes, please. Okay, I remember those. Yes.
Oh, that's into. Alex, so this is the relationship with Sovereign Mews. So that's showing that from a standard height of 1.7 meters, you can't see into any of the windows on Sovereign Mews, and then it's showing the same for the Pearson Road properties.
Okay.
Specify the dimensions.
Okay. I understand then. So, yeah. Okay. So let's ask the objector then to this one. This final picture, which is onto the Pearson Road elevation, isn't it? What overlooking is suggest? Who lives there? Okay. What overlooking are you suggesting on there?
So the height of the Gayhurst windows isn't specified. So anyone with a 6-foot wall in theory can look down into the properties. And also on the north face, those windows are glazed and stacked windows 10 meters away from the back of our homes. They will be clear privacy compromise.
10.1 meters is almost a width of a road, isn't it? Yeah.
Approximately.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions, members?
Well, and more of an observation, Chair. I mean, there is no right not to be overlooked. What we're looking at here is whether the extent of any overlooking is acceptable. Most properties in Hackney are overlooked by someone to some degree, just to be to be clear what we're considering.
Thank you. And we say this many times. This is a very dense part of the city, and so there will be some issues of overlooking. And I think we've all got it where we live. You'd be very lucky not to have it.
I just wanted to ask the objectors if I could, Chair. I mean, the fact that the circular window is obscured, does that go any way to satisfy the issues you were raising about it?
But it's fully obscured, halfway obscured.
Circular window, that would be for the...
Below 1.7 metres will be obscured, won't it?
Of the circular window?
Yes. Was that right, Louis?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that goes halfway up the window or something like that.
I use a window 5 centimetres away from a window. So
Hang on. 1.7 metres is so what is that? Half of the window is going to be obscure glazing, or
more than half? Yeah, I think it's slightly more than half. More than half.
Slightly more than half. Okay.
I couldn't find out any of the drawings.
Okay.
We'll have to show you the drawings.
Yeah, 1.7 metres is, what is it in feet and inches? I'm old enough to worry. You're 1.8, okay. So you just above your, okay. And AJ?
I was just going to ask for more clarification on this BRE guidelines, because the objectives have made play of this, that it's not within the guidelines. So can the planning officer tell us?
Louise, do you want to do the BRE guidelines?
Yep. So there are, the BRE was assessed for the 3 tests of vertical sky component, no skyline, and annual probable sunlight hours. The vertical sky component found that all of the windows assessed on both Pearson Street and Sovereign Mews were compliant, indicating a good level of daylight. For the no skyline test, there were 4 deviations from the recommended BRE figures. 1 window in 12 Pearson Street, 1 in 14, and then 2 in what's they've termed 11 to 13 Sovereign Mews. We've assessed the deviations from the scheme and consider that overall the development provides a good standard of accommodation. It is noted that there is only 1 deviation from the sunlight hours test, and while it's 4 hours, 4% in winter, and the target figure is 5, it achieves 60 annually. So it's considered to provide a good standard of accommodation still for all surrounding occupiers.
That's outside.
And for AJ and others, can you tell us a bit about the background to BRE guidance? It's not black and white, is it, please, Louise?
No, so we tend to, the supporting text in the local plan talks about the fact that the guidelines were just developed generally for suburban environments. We expect in Hackney that generally there will be some deviations from the scheme, from the BRE figures, but in general this is considered to be quite a good scheme.
Sarah.
I want to make sure I understand what this means. So the worst BRE figure, which property does it affect, and which windows, which rooms, and how many, what proportion of that property is affected?
So we can't be sure because we don't have the room details for all of the surrounding developments. But there is 1 window in 14 Pearson Street, which at the time of writing the report, it wasn't clear which habitable room this was for. And then there's also 1 window in Sovereign Mews. Again, it's not clear what that window serves. There's a lesser deviation to 12 Pearson Street, but our records, the records in the daylight and sunlight, so that's to a bedroom.
We ask the objectors because they'll know which rooms it is in their own homes.
You can ask the objectors.
So yeah, that's my living room. So it's quite a long room. So without that light, it's going to feel completely dull, and it's really going to make a difference. My cat sits in that light. My girlfriend sits in that light. The light is so important for this house. My girlfriend has seasonal effect of this, so she needs light in winter.
I heard that,
I
thanks.
would take it as far as it needs to go.
And yours is 14 Pearson, is it? Okay.
The transaction, it's a 66.7% loss in win there, and that brings it down to 4%. 5% is the absolute minimum. Remember, this is a grade 2 listed building. You need to protect the light of these buildings, and especially when the residents, when light is so important to them.
Thank you.
Okay, was that fair commentary, Louise?
Yep, so my understanding is that it's to a living room. It is only one window for the unit, and we consider that while there is a shortfall from the BRE guidance, given the reasons about it being in a dense urban environment, and one window, it's still considered to provide sufficient daylight, especially considering the VSC figure and the sunlight figures.
Thank you. Any more?
Chair, Gareth wants to come in. He has his hand raised.
Gareth.
Hello, Chair. Hello, members. You okay?
Letters.
No, I'm still here. Could I just re-summarise what Louise just said, if that's okay?
Yes, of course.
So BRE guidance is obviously, it's not a policy instrument. It's simply guidance that you make towards an overall kind of amenity judgment. Looking at the results of Louise, and I've not actually checked the actual study, but I've looked at obviously her report. The actual results are very, very modest on the adjoining properties. The reason why is that all VSC passes, so there's no daylight impact to any of the adjoining properties. However, there's only 4 minor shortfalls in terms of sunlight. And in BRE, a shortfall is what's defined as a noticeable impact. And all of those impacts are marginally below the 0.8% form of value that BRE says is a noticeable impact. So on that basis, we think it's acceptable.
Thank you. Okay, members.
Something. Did I understand the objection correctly to say that it was a 67% loss of?
Yeah, on
because I'm looking at the report in paragraph 6.5.10, and it says it would have a figure of 67% of the former value. That's not the same as. Could I ask my question? Could I ask the officer to clarify, please? In paragraph 6.5.10, it refers to the window having a figure of 67% of its former value. Could you clarify whether that represents a 67% loss?
No, so that's so you're aiming for an 80% retention, and that's the BRE recommended figure, and it retains 67.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we know what we're about. So the recommendation is grant plan permission subject to conditions. All those in favour, please show. That is all of us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Item isn't a number on there.
Should be on 7.
Item 7, please. Gayhurst Primary School.
If there's anyone speaking, I'm just registered.
Okay.
I'm fixed.
I will check outside for
windows.
Okay.
That was all the skylight windows as well. Something we talked about.
Gayhurst. So there's nobody. We don't think there's anybody for Gayhurst. Alex, please.
No.
Are they obscure?
They won't be obscure, I don't think.
There's not supposed to be an eye line.
And
No,
the relapse window, when you point out, you can't look out of them.
Yeah, if they opened, that you would. But I
Yeah,
didn't
no, they won't.
That's great. No,
They're
yeah.
above 1.7 metres.
going to be used for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to begin, Chair?
No, we're going to see if anybody's here.
Oh, okay.
We've got a system of keeping people out of the room until the item is called. So
Okay.
there's somebody desperate to be interested in Gayhurst School fence.
Into the mirror image.
Any sign? Nobody. Okay. Sam, you're in the room. Alex, please.
Okay, is my screen visible?
No. I think it's Jessica's got to do something. We can see you now, and we can see your site boundary.
Okay, great. So applications 2021/1543 and 2021/1564 comprise applications for full planning permission and listed building consent for widespread and large-scale external repairs at Gayhurst Primary School. It should be noted that following the publication of committee papers, elevations of the western boundary proposals were received, then included notation outlining that the extent of vegetation could not accurately be plotted and that the existing vegetation would be retained as far as practically possible, with any minor pruning to be agreed by the owner. So the site is an irregular shaped parcel of land which is bounded by Gayhurst Road to the north, London Fields west side to the east, Wilman Grove to the south, and Appleby Road to the west. Residential properties fronting Appleby Roads and Wilman Grove adjoin the site to the west. The site comprises a 3- and 4-storey building to the north of the site in use as a school, as well as ancillary storage buildings to the south of the site. The site is located within the Graham Road and Mapledean Conservation Area, and the building is nationally listed by Historic England for Grade 2. The surrounding area is primarily residential in character, and London Fields is located directly to the east of the site. So these are just some photos of the existing site. The main building was designed by Edward Robert Robson, architect for the School Board of London from 1871 to 1884. The school is of high national significance as an almost intact early Robson elementary school. So the school was consciously located in dialogue with the adjacent common land at London Fields and forms a local landmark in important views within the conservation area. So given the age of the building, there's a requirement for planned maintenance, and these photos just show some of the repairs that are required. There is a genuine risk to health and safety should the proposed works not be completed. As the building deteriorates further, there are potential for areas of the building construction to suffer failure and detaching, causing a hazard to the occupants. There's also a need to improve the aesthetic appearance of the building belonging to an area of historical significance. So the proposal seeks to undertake a number of repair works that include repair and replacements of parts of the roof covering with historically correct materials, repair and replacement of rainwater goods, repointing and repair of brickwork, repair and replacement of metalwork including railings, repair and replacement of stonework, repairs to some boundary walls, repair and replacement of leadwork, partial external redecoration, installation of snow guards, and removals of vegetation from the building. So just to let you know, there's been a large amount of consultation with the council regarding the proposed repair works. The proposed works are justified by the need to keep the building functioning well. It's in its original use to secure the longevity of the heritage asset and the school use. The proposal will provide significant public benefit through the proposed repairs, ensuring that the development meets the requirements of the NPPF, specifically paragraph 202, by protecting the listed building and securing its optimum viable use. So the main reason for coming to committee, there are proposals on the western boundary, which has raised concerns with adjoining occupiers. So it's proposed to undertake the replacement of wire mesh fence to be freestanding. So the existing affixing of the wire fence mesh on the walls using mild steel has contributed to the deteriorating structural conditions of the lime mortar wall. So this is the proposal that you can see. The new fencing would consist of freestanding fence situated within the boundary of a school to a maximum height of 2 metres. The applicant has confirmed the existing vegetation is proposed to be retained as far as practically possible. So here you can see that the boundary fencing will be set off the boundary wall and has a maximum height of 2 metres. The height of the new boundary fencing and retention of vegetation as far as practically possible would ensure acceptable impacts for adjoining properties in regard to daylight, sunlight and outlook, and ensure privacy impacts are not worsened. The proposed repair works, including the new boundary fencing, will cause no harm and will benefit the significance of the heritage asset, since they will preserve the building in its current use and in good condition for the future, resulting in significant public benefit. The development will not give rise to any significant off-site amenity impacts. All other material planning considerations have been covered within the report. Officers therefore recommend that the planning permission and listed building consent be granted subject to conditions.
Thank you. just before I ask Tim to tell us about this school, wonderful school, the dormer business, is that, that's a mistake, is it?
Yes, that is. So as outlined in the addendum, that was deleted.
Thank you. So Tim, tell us about this wonderful school and are we happy with it? All the works that are being done?
Yeah, I mean, Hackney's really lucky because there's a key moment in 1870 where the Victorians introduced universal free elementary education, and the London School Board was a particular pioneer in doing it really well in purpose-built buildings by Edward Robert Robson, who became the national expert on school buildings at the time. Hackney's really lucky in that it's got some of his early ones which are listed. In fact, we've got 3 or 4, better than most other London boroughs, so they really are of national significance. This is a particularly pretty building which looks very nice from London Fields in a Queen Anne style. I mean, the background is that the Education Department has been doing what they're calling facade repairs on all of its schools to make sure basically that bits don't fall off onto children, and also while they're at it to fix the rainwater goods and everything else so that the schools are in good repair. And the Education Department has spent many millions of pounds in recent years across its school estate in looking after its Victorian schools in a scheme which is a model of good practice, actually. So absolutely no hesitation in saying I'm very happy with this. I've been all over it at pre-app stages, and all of the proposed works are heritage good practice. The only reason it's come to committee is some concerns about the fencing, which I can talk about if you wish.
No, I don't. I'm okay with that. Any questions, members?
We're going to ask about the fencing.
Okay, ask about the fencing then.
Well, the conservation area, people said they weren't sure whether it was replacement or new.
It's new. I mean, what happened was these schools typically have a big wall around them. I'm sure you're all familiar with the big tall red and yellow brick walls. They would have just had a wall and you weren't allowed to play ball in the Victorian era. At some point in the 20th century, you were allowed to play ball, and of course your ball went over the wall. And so what they all had all the way across London was these mild steel brackets that were bolted either side of the wall, and then an upright bit that stuck up with basically chicken wire. All of these things look a bit of a mess, and they're well past their sell-by date because they're probably from the 50s. They also have the effect of all the ironwork rusts and starts to destroy the wall, and generally speaking, they're falling down. And so across the board, Hackney's been replacing them with a more modern fencing system, which won't corrode and will look better and will do the job of keeping balls and things inside the school.
And won't be bolted to the wall?
No, it's free. Well, it's the posts go down to the ground on the inside face of the wall, which is to prevent wind loading, because obviously when it's really windy, there's quite a lot of pressure. But it's a much better system.
Thank you. Any more? Sarah?
The vegetation, which will be, this probably isn't for you, sorry. So the officer said that the vegetation will be retained where possible. I just wasn't sure I understood what vegetation would be lost.
Yeah, so we've had a number of objections. Well, we've actually had different views. Some neighbours want the vegetation to be removed on the western boundary wall. Some neighbours want the vegetation to retain.
What is the vegetation?
There's some Russian ivy, but there's no justification in biodiversity terms to retain or remove this. It's not a protected species, so.
Could we protect it if we wanted to?
Sorry?
Thank you.
I'd like to see the condition. Okay. Any more questions? No. So the recommendations: grant plan permission list and building consent, subject to condition. All those in favour, please show. That's all of us. Thank you very much. Okay. Item 8, 1 to 10 Purcell Street.
I haven't got that.
Oh yes, the ward is wrong. Which ward is it? Hoxton East. Okay, James, please. Have we got anybody speaking? We've got to catch people in, haven't we? 1 minute, James.
Right.
Sorry?
We've got Sinead and Hugo. Just to introduce James, he's a new member of, well, a new presenter to us this evening. Welcome, James.
Good evening, councillors. Yeah, I believe Sinead and Hugo are supposed to be speaking. I don't know if they're there.
currently.
Yeah, we're going out to fetch them.
Okay, excellent. I'll just get my slides up.
Are you James? Are you Sinead? No?
Don't look like
You're Hugo, aren't you? Okay, Sinead?
She was potentially pretending, but I haven't heard anything.
Okay, so you're an objector, okay? Thank you. So,
Yes.
yes. So, okay, the objectors have sat there all evening, but as you're on your own, you can sit here, sit there, there's no problem at all. No, sit there, please.
You're sitting where the applicants normally sit, which is why I asked, but it's fine. It's fine. We know who you are, thank you.
Okay, over to James, please.
Good evening, councillors. So this application is very straightforward. It's just for a window replacement at 1 to 10 Purcell Street. You can see the application site outlined here in red, just to the north of Purcell Street and to the east of Pitfield Street. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, sorry, yes.
Okay, so yeah, the application site is outlined there in red. It refers to it. This site is not in like any site inside any kind of conservation area. It's not a listed building and doesn't affect the setting of any locally or nationally listed building. The reason why it's been taken to committee is because it is a Hackney Council application to replace the windows, and we've received an objection, and therefore the procedure is taken to committee. You can sort of see the surrounding context of the site. You have these other many post-war housing blocks. There's a variety in the sort of existing windows. Some of them are timber, others are UPVC, and to the south there's a few metal windows. So there's a sort of a broad character in the style of the buildings here. The actual site itself is we believe it to be a 1970s housing block. The existing windows in this are timber, single glazed, brown painted casement windows. These are the windows that the applicant is seeking to place. The proposed replacements will be UPVC windows, which will be double glazed, and again will also be casement windows. It's of note that originally the windows were going to be white windows, but then we negotiated with them and got them to change into I think the official name of the colour is rosewood windows. That should be closer in appearance to the existing brown windows. Yeah. You can see more photos of the site here. It's of note that a similar application to this has already been approved just down the street. There you go. Just down the street, you can see that we've approved another site here, another similar application down here for UPVC replacement windows of a similar, again, well, essentially identical to what's been approved here. So there's already an established precedent for the development of this type. So it's for a reason of these combined reasons that we decided to recommend the application for approval. Partially again because of the existing context of the site. The building itself is not just to be of significant architectural character due to its sort of appearance and period of the building when the building was constructed. The existing precedent in the surrounding area, there are already UPVC windows and they've already been approved in the surrounding area. So we believe that like UPVC windows, which will be, as they are UPVC, they will be different in materials to the existing windows, and there will be a marginal increase in the dimensions of the window. That's partly because they are UPVC windows and also because they will be double glazing, so there will be an increase in the frames to hold that. So there will be a marginal increase, but we believe that is acceptable given the sort of context of the site and the surrounding area. There are also benefits. There will be no impact on neighbouring amenity, any of the surrounding buildings, as this is just a Windows application. The only impact will be upon the tenants themselves when the sort of slight inconvenience in the place of the windows, but that's to be expected in any sort of work like this. And lastly, the sort of primary motivation for the applicants to replace these windows is because they want to improve the thermal efficiency of the properties. I believe they said they wanted to get it up to building control standards, so that is the reason why they are replacing the existing windows with UPVC equivalents. You can sort of see the design of the windows here. that has to be replaced. It's going to be bottom hung and side hung tilt and turn windows. So we believe that those are acceptable for the site as it is. Yes, as it is.
Thank you.
And so that therefore we recommend it for approval.
Thank you. Hugo, please, 5 minutes if you.
Thank you. I'm a resident in flat 4 of the building. So I had a few sort of points based on the statement, design access statement, and the other documents that have been provided. In terms of, I think one of the main points was that this related to maintenance and repairs on the building, which I don't think any of that indicates it did. I don't think it does relate to maintenance repairs on the basis that well, there hasn't been any surveys done of the windows and there isn't anything wrong with the existing ones. So I think that's a main issue for us, for the residents. In terms of insulation, I think that's another main point. The windows are largely being installed into cladding, which isn't insulated itself. So I'm not sure that there will actually be any insulation benefit because the air actually leaks in through the cladding. Also, the existing doors are being left in on the sides by the windows. So those will leak in air in exactly the same way as the existing windows do. In terms of the environmental impact, the existing windows are quite well, sort of wooden windows, so being replaced with plastic ones when the existing ones are in perfectly good condition seems a little ridiculous. On the aesthetic points, I think the existing windows are wooden, so it seems odd to replace them. There's we've been actually told that they're being replaced with white plastic windows in accordance with the rest of the area. I can see in the planning application, as we've said, it's rosewood, so I'm not sure. There seems to be a bit of inconsistency there. I'm not sure if that's been decided as actually the rosewood ones. I think there's also an odd point in the common parts. We've been told all the windows are being replaced in the stairwells. I know that's not actually in the planning application, so I've looked through the plans on the elevation plans. There's no indication those windows are being replaced. There wouldn't be any environmental benefit to replacing those windows because then the area doesn't need to be insulated, there's no heating. But it's going to look quite odd if half the building has plastic windows and the other half has the old wooden ones. I think just on other points, there's the existing windows can be flipped inside out for cleaning purposes. So from any unit within the building, you can flip inside out the windows, you can clean them. That's not the case, I think, with these ones. Which is, if you look at other blocks in the area where these windows have been put in, they actually look quite dirty from the outside. In terms of benefits to residents, I think that's another main point here. Well, I've spoken to the residents throughout the block, and none of them think this is a benefit to them. So I'm not sure where that's come from. And I think the last point on that was there was a comment that this has been approved in a block down the road. I don't know if there were actually any objections in relation to that, so I'm not sure how relevant that is.
Thank you very much. This is perplexing. We haven't got anybody, what we can control in terms of the planning process and all of this. We haven't got anybody from the housing department. James, do you know where Sinead is? What the story is?
They haven't turned up. We believe they were coming, but it seems to me if they're not there, then they're not there, unfortunately. They have provided a comment to me to sort of represent on their behalf as to why they sort of replaced these windows. They said that it was they had the option between repairing the existing windows and maintaining them, replacing them with timber windows, and replacing them with UPVC windows. Of the three options they had, they didn't choose the repair windows because they didn't believe it was cost effective, and they didn't see they didn't believe it would provide the thermal improvements that they were looking for. In regards to timber, again, it was similar story. They didn't believe that they would provide the thermal improvements that they were looking for, and they believed it was cost effective. Again, for the last one, they believe it, we've run it because you can see windows because they believe it's the most cost-effective solution. It achieves the thermal performance standards that they were looking for in regards to sort of, again, their primary objective here is to improve the thermal performance. And I believe they also, I believe what they thought it was in suit with the character of the area, so they believe it would be acceptable. It's not normally their policy to install UPVC windows unless it's in a conservation area. So it's not normally their policy to install timber windows unless it's a conservation area or a listed building. So in the case of this site, they believe it was acceptable to install UPVC windows, and we've agreed with that assessment.
Okay, this is very difficult. You know, I mean, we've got an objector here, we haven't got an applicant. And although some of these things that he's talked about are not material, some of them are. And, you know, we're not in a position to be able to ask anybody anything.
Yeah, we have previously said more than once to other council departments that they should send someone.
Yeah, okay.
It's also for Gayhurst School. So it's
Gayhurst School was simple, wasn't it?
It was fairly simple.
It wasn't an objector that turned up.
That's also true.
And
but I still think they should send someone in case.
There are questions that this gentleman has got.
There have been questions on Gayhurst School, and I think as a general principle we should require a relevant officer to be present. It's your call whether we vote on this tonight, but
I don't think with Gayhurst School we had any questions to ask that weren't answered really, but I think there are here. I'm sorry, I think we're going to defer this. And they'll just have to send somebody along to tell us what the story is. We can't have it interpreted by the planning officer on behalf of the council. Just doesn't work like that because, you know, when did we decide that we're going to be white, rosewood instead of white?
So we were engaged in discussions with the applicant when this was first noticed as an issue, and they decided to
don't know what colour. I mean, the colour of the thing. I mean, it's not. It's not a planning matter really, but I'd have thought the residents would know what colour the stuff is going to be before they.
Can we record in the minutes, Chair, that we'd like the person who attends to be able to answer the questions that have been raised tonight, plus further questions that may be raised.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm afraid we're going to defer this matter. Apologies if I had to come along. I don't know what the outcome of it all will be, but at least we'll get some answers to your questions that we can comfortably make a decision on.
So just a quick question, Chair. I mean, he's taken his time to come. If this is deferred, can he raise his objections online just to kind of not waste his time?
Well, we will defer it and he'll have to make his own mind up as to whether he wants
Welcome to attend in person. Or
okay, thank you very much. So that is deferred.
Sorry to interrupt, probably as what we do, that's fine, still correct procedure, you know, defer it, so you should still vote on the recommendation.
But we don't have information.
It's not what we do.
We've voted to defer it. We've agreed to defer it.
But we'll vote on the recommendation if you want a refusal.
I would argue you have a recommendation.
Okay, the recommendation is that we defer this item until somebody from the housing department.
Sorry, I'm
Got it.
Okay. Katie, propose a motion to defer.
I propose we defer.
Okay, all those in favour of deferring this item, please show. That's 5 of us. Not those against? Abstention.
Abstaining.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Have we got any delegated points? Yes, we've got some delegated decisions to have a look at. Please do, and if you have any issues, ask officers about them. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, James, that wasn't very satisfactory this evening for you, but that's what we've concluded and we've come to. Okay, he's still at work, isn't he?
Who is?
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and good night. And
I'm teasing.